arm slots. So, there are the videos out there that I've seen, Brady, you talk about over the top throws. Brady is
Yep.
really, really over the top.
Yep.
I notice a lot of the really good quarterbacks sit in that three-quarter spot
Yep.
very regularly. And Trey Lance, to me, people are saying it's sidearm. I don't see that. I see more of a three-quarter arm slot.
Yep.
Just arm slots in general. Is there one that's better than the other that you would try to work through, or how does that whole thing work?
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to efficiency, right? And so, like, how quickly from the time I separate my hands to throw can I have my elbow attack to the target and then have the ball released from my hand, right? If that makes sense. So the reality is, the lower the elbow has to elevate above the shoulder, the
Mhm.
quicker you can accelerate the elbow to the target. So in my world, we love the aggressive three-quarter, as close to as close to sidearm as we can get because it's the more efficient throwing motion. Now there's height things you have to worry about if you're trying to throw over defenders and stuff like that, dropping the ball 3 inches lower. It can come into play. In the same way, you'll see quarterbacks go completely sidearm to throw underneath maybe an eggs defender. Sometimes we'll need to elevate the elbow a little bit more to ensure that we get over defenders that might be underneath us or have their hands up. But for a guy who's got the height that Trey has, and the reality of what we do, we don't really throw over defenders that often. We're really throwing through lanes and through windows. I, this would be one I would throw out as a complete non-issue. And like I said, I wasn't going to do that with wobbly throws because I get it. There's probably 10 guys that do what I do that would argue that Tom Brady's mechanics are inefficient. Does that make sense? It's a funny thing to say.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm not
Right,
critiquing
right.
a guy with his talent. And to answer your question, it's more important that you find something that works for you that you're really consistent with. Consistency is so key, right? Even if I did things that weren't the best way to do them, if I did it the same way every time, I'd be really, really successful at the quarterback position. So find the thing that works for you, which I think guys like Trey have and Pat Mahomes does. Malik's a very much three-quarter arm slot guy as well, who we talked about earlier. Um, you look around the league, I think the most important thing to see is that there's no two guys doing it the same way, right? Like Pat Mahomes does not look anything like Tom Brady. Neither of those two guys look anything like Aaron Rodgers when they throw the
Right.
football, right? And neither of them look like Trey, and Trey doesn't look like Jimmy, and all that's fine, right? Because they're obviously having a ton of success doing it their way.
One thing I actually do have a question for you, and I feel like one of the things I thought about Trey coming out that I felt like he could work on was kind of changing the arm slots
Yeah,
depending on the passes. I felt like Aaron Rodgers was really good about this. Zach Wilson, that was one of the things that was highly touted
sure.
about him. And I felt like that was an area of opportunity for Trey. And I'm starting to see some of those changes in the arm angles depending on the throw. But one throw that I do still feel like he really needs to work on is that quick get it and fire it directly along the line of scrimmage for like a screen or something. I feel like
Mhm.
it's almost like he has to go through the whole motion. So, and I see the 49ers constantly working on this pass before he gets into things. So,
Sure.
how would you like how do you work on things like that with quarterbacks? Like how do you get them to be quicker and not worrying about just getting their hands on the laces and shortening things up and changing it in those rare instances without messing up their mechanics completely.
Yeah, that's the toughest part because, like you said, we just spent all this time talking about consistency, doing things the same way every
Right.
time. And now we're saying, hey, is there a way we can kind of do it differently because this throw requires it? I think that's the hardest thing to for a quarterback to kind of get through his head, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because it's so against what their normal thought process would be. I wish there's a better answer. It's repetition. It's what you're seeing. It's why they're spending so much time, pre-practice and early on, especially because it's part of their offense. When you got the weapons they have, and you got to get, Brandon and Debo and those guys the ball quickly. That screen game and getting that ball to those receivers outside is such a big piece of what they do. Yeah, I mean, it's something that, the idea is in a play scheme like that or a concept like that, those guys are the playmakers. the quicker you get them the ball, the bigger chance we have for a play. So I think the coaching point there is, what can we sacrifice from your normal throwing mechanics to speed up the time that the ball gets out? Does that make sense? And what we
Yeah.
can sacrifice is, hey, I don't need to have as much power. I don't need to get my hips all the way fired through. I don't maybe need to get myself completely straight line throw to the target because that's only 10, 12 yards away, and I can get away with some sidearm stuff or some weird arm angles, or make throws where I don't get my feet completely set and create a straight line throw. That's where you kind of try to steal some time. Um, so, I think Trey, and I haven't seen as much of him struggling with that throw, but as I'm hearing you describe it, it's him just being comfortable, realizing like, hey, this is a throw that you don't have to worry about being perfect on, if that makes sense. And I think, up to this point, I think, Kyle and the whole 49ers offensive coaching staff has done such a good job of kind of molding Trey into the quarterback that they need him to be for this system. So I think that's something comes pretty naturally. It's so funny because really the athletic ability he has, his ability to throw from these aggressive arm slots should be what allows him to do this really well. So I don't think it's going to be a lack of ability that gets him there. It's just going to be
Right.
a repetition until he gets very comfortable.
Yeah, and to me, it's funny because we talk about Trey and we talk about all the athletic ability and physical abilities, and I just think he's kind of the ultimate like conservative player, right? He protects the ball first,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
fantastic. That's like number one thing as a quarterback.
Yeah.
And so I almost feel like, in hearing Fred Warner and some of the players talk about him last year, and really my thoughts about him was like he's almost too conservative. It's
Yeah.
okay to like just go out there and fire it around, man. Be you a little
Yeah.
bit. And so I think just growing into himself may actually help with that as well.
I think that's a great observation. It's one of the things, and Quincy Avery talked about this in his draft process, his pre-draft process. It's one of the criticisms. He had that phenomenal junior year where he didn't throw an interception for the entire year. That's a guy who manages the game, who protects the football. That's why they go undefeated and win a national championship. But also, to your point, is he reluctant to throw the ball as much as he should? Is he, similar to what we are talking about with Malik, did he rely on, hey, I'd rather pull it down and run than try to fit a tight throw in? No, that was something that I think was one of the criticisms we got in the pre-draft process. Something I told you Quincy Avery talked about a lot in some of the interviews he did leading up to the draft. Yeah, it's kind of a blessing and a curse. And yeah, I've heard it. I remember, Kittle last year and this offseason saying like, hey, when it really clicked and we knew he was going to be special was when he started
Right.
just letting some of those throws rip in practice, right?
Yeah.
That's the other thing too. It's like this is the time to figure out what you're capable of, what throws you can make, and what throws you can't make. Which is always funny when I watch a practice report come out. Oh, this quarterback was 14 to 20 and he threw up 2 picks, and the whole world melts down, right? Like we need another quarterback. It's like, no, this is what we want. Like, let him go out there and be a gunslinger. And the reality is he learns the lessons now, and those are throws and mistakes he doesn't make come week one. Um, which is what you want. I mean, that's good coaching. And a quarterback who realizes this is the time to do that's a good thing.
It's I'm so glad you said that. That was going to be my follow-up because
Yeah.
that's exactly what's happening, right? We've got every beat writer going there and reporting his only 50% so far through training camp, and he's at a 1-to-1 ratio with his
Yeah.
interceptions to touchdowns, and somehow that overrides what we actually saw when he
Yeah.
played, which looked really good. It's
But
wild to
once again,
me.
I made this point earlier. It's not exclusive to your fan base. That's the thing. Like
Right.
and I know you do too. You're
For
observing the
sure.
whole league, and it's no different coming out of Jets camp. It's no different coming out of Jacksonville. It's no different coming out of New York with the Giants. Like, it's just, I mean, everybody. I'm watching the Titans do the same thing with all their quarterbacks. Yeah, it's just that's what training camp is, it's cool that people get the opportunity to see things and come to live practices and the media gets out there and they can chart every pass thrown. And it's cool because people love football and they want to consume and that's what they have to follow right now. So, like I said, it's not a bad thing. It's just we got to be realistic about what we're talking about.
Yeah, last offseason, Jamar Chase forgot how to catch a football,
That's right.
if you remember correctly.
Yeah.
So we saw how that turned
We
out.
put
It turned
stripes
out just
back on
fine.
it, right? You couldn't see it, right? So,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. So, anyways, 49ers daddy says Trey Lance is going to be a legend in this league. Thanks, coach, for all of your work to help him on his journey to this point. That's cool.
That's awesome, man. Like I said, a very small part that we've been fortunate to be able to help with.